Hello, and welcome to the Command Point Podcast. My name is Ryan, and on this week's episode, my co-host Shane and I got to interview Michael T. Holy, fresh off his LVO Kill Team Championship victory. In this interview, we asked about his preparation leading up to LVO, and then Michael gave us a round-by-round breakdown of his 7-1 run to take first at LVO and ultimately be crowned the ITC Kill Team Champion. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Yeah. So first things first, thanks for coming on to our podcast.
Oh, sure.
This is awesome. It's kind of like we're getting to interview like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or the Tiger Woods of Kill Team, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a C-list guy in the Warhammer community, but Kill Team, there's one room where I get to.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I mean, we're not really in the Warhammer community, so outside of Kill Team.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess for starters, I have a bunch written here, but starting off, this feels a little bit appropriate. I just wanted to ask about your prep for major events like this. I don't know if you've talked about this before, but I mean, with the packets constantly coming out and so much to prepare for, and how do you usually go through that process?
I play a lot of games against myself.
Okay.
Using the missions from the packet. I think about it maybe just a little bit before that, but I find that, you don't know how a packet's going to really work until you start doing it. And in this case, initially Kill Team Academy had sent me the packet. I mean, I had sort of an advanced copy of it, and then he finally settled on how he was going to do it. And I took like a month off of everything, basically over December, between work and just my family and stuff. So at the beginning of January, I came back in. He had his finalized packet, and he had two different terrain setups. So I built a table kind of based on it, and then I just, I make lists for the things I'm scared of, and then I run practice games. Right, based on what I think might be the meta, and then in that process, the list evolves. And I think that you'll probably ask about the roster in a second, so I'll save that. But the roster process is happening in the course of these games. But the first step is that there's usually some lists that sound terrifying, and I want to beat them. You know what I mean? I want to practice until I feel really good about that matchup. And you never know what's going to happen, but I want to feel very confident about the matchups that I'm sort of most concerned about as much as I can. And then after that, and I should say that practice really focuses on what you might call like a gatekeeper style list. Because the thing about a gatekeeper list is you know what it's going to be. And what you can't prepare for, and what I always say are going to be the tournament winners, is like the 20-man AdMech list that could present 7 different ways, right? I can't, it's too much for me to make all the different lists. So I try to get a feel for it, and I got to be a little bit more abstract about that. But the actual gatekeepers that you expect, in this case, Custodes for sure, I mean, you can run that until you beat yourself playing Custodes as much as you think you can, right? And then you move on. So that's been my practice for all the tournaments this year. I mean, even before I started playing Kill Team or knowing I was going to go to a tournament, I did that with the old Nova packet after I saw George interview Elliot. There was a Death Guard list that they talked. I mean, George's Death Guard list, Elliot's Plasma list, and then they mentioned a Cultist Spam list. And I made those 3 lists, and then I made Harlequins, which I, at the time, had heard about and thought was scary. And I just practiced against those until I could beat those 4. And then I figured, well, I've learned enough in this process that now I should be ready to handle other things. And so that process has worked for me the whole year.
That's cool. So that's That's a whole lot of work, but I mean, like, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I think I remember now that you mentioned to Glass Half Dead that you did do a lot of the Sad Hammer one-on-one games, and I've
Using
done
like Lego bricks for the terrain, right?
I've gone
Initially,
down that path.
yeah. I mean, and then I won terrain over the course of the year. So now I've,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I've been down that path of doing the games with myself just to get as much practice in, and it's tougher than it sounds for anyone that hasn't done it.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a draining exercise, and I have to, normally I would do it. We've got like an Airbnb in our house, and I would use that. But my sister-in-law was living with us, so I had to just every day, done with work, got to clear off the work, set up the table, and try to get one game in. And then I got to clear up and be in bed in time to get up to take care of the kids and everything. So, but I've been playing games against myself since I was a kid. I was an only child, and I kind of get a kick out of that. So that's easier for me. And I did practice. I mean, me and Miguel beat me at LVO last year. I mean, he lives in the area. But the problem is Miguel has like a really different lifestyle than me. His wife is a nurse. He's a tattoo artist. And they're late night people,
Yeah.
And my wife is a school teacher, and she's got to be out the door at 6:40 in the morning. So we're like super early people.
Yeah.
And so it's a little hard to coordinate.
Okay. Speaking of terrain, how did you feel about the terrain setup that they settled on for LVO this year?
Well, and before I answer, I want to give a caveat because Sheldon worked so hard for the SoCal terrain, and it was, beautiful and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I mean, this was the best terrain setup for a tournament that I've ever been part of. Like by far.
Okay.
Tournaments need a lot of line of sight blocking to be any good at all. And I mean, this is the first one that really did a pretty good job with that. And as we talk, I don't want to say it had a defect, but I mean, there was definitely a big caveat to there being a good line of sight blocking board. But on the whole, the best we've ever seen, and I loved it. I mean, it made for much better games.
Yeah.
And it made for new strategies and everything else, which is the idea. Yeah, it doesn't matter how pretty the board is. I mean, if you can just sort of shoot anywhere, I mean, it just detracts from the game so much. So, I mean, that's why I'm a fan of this open door arena that they're going to do, I guess, some tournaments. I mean, I don't exactly remember how that came up, but I know after Nova, I was chatting briefly even with Mike Brandt when he came on our channel, and then certainly with the TO of Nova out there. And I thought that was just like, I was like, have you guys thought about this? And they were like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then I was talking to Sheldon about it, and he probably heard it from other people too. But I'm really excited to see that come to fruition. I think that's going to be a good.
Yeah. On a side note, are you going to be at BAO?
Well, it's possible. On the whole, this year is going to be a light year for me. So last year, I mean, you guys may not know, but I mean, I kind of just said, hey, I'm going to go to enough Kill Team tournaments to like max. I'm going to have all the tournaments. At the end of the year, I don't know where I'm going to be, but I'm going to have all the tournaments. And so I kind of made that declaration, and I made that, something that I was going to devote time to. But I can't do that year in and year out with a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and now a pregnant wife. So, and we're doing a remodel. There's a lot going on this year. So I won't probably have 5 tournament scores this year. But that being said, BAO is close by. It's a possible one day there and back. So I might be at BAO.
Okay.
Cool.
I might be at something. And I will be at LVO next year. I think that I can say for sure. But, the baby's born in August. So like 3 months after, 3 months before, it's very tough to do much. And that's like the whole season. Do you guys have kids?
No. Thank goodness.
No.
Yeah, we're both 24, 25, or not there yet.
Right. Well, I was 40 before I had my first kid, so I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but
I mean, whatever's working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, this is your question, Shane, about the Friday pods.
What was it? I didn't even write that one down.
So you didn't play on any of the Friday pods, but we know that you were watching the games. While you were watching the games, did that inform any of your decisions leading up to like what your final command roster was for the grand tournament?
Well, as it turns out, it didn't. You're watching the pods. I mean, that came away with two conclusions. One, there's a lot of Astra Militarum there. I thought Astra Militarum might be scary. It turns out none of those players really did great. But I was a little bit scared of Astra Militarum going in, and that had been something I just hadn't practiced a lot against, just hadn't had the time. So I was worried about that, but I didn't, I didn't really make any variations because of it. I mean, I thought there was going to be a lot of them. There were a lot of them, and I was like, damn, just like I thought. And the other thing that I thought there was going to be, I didn't think there were going to be 5 of them, but I thought there were going to be Asuryani players there that were good. I mean, obviously I knew Janice was going to be there.
Yeah.
And I figured it was about time that somebody else was probably going to take it up. As it turns out, I mean, that was an underestimation of what was going to be there. Yeah. I think I probably should have practiced against Asuryani. It's hard to practice against the same faction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you'd almost just have to say, okay, this one's going to do, I'm going to like write a little mini program for this one and a little mini program for this. So they're going to play really different. And then we're going to see how that goes and stuff. It would be like a project unto itself, a harder one. I just didn't get to it. And, I mean, from the perspective of winning the ITC, it was important since Janice was like in the very best position to overtake me. So obviously losing to her one-on-one would, like be the first step of that coming to pass. But that being said, that was just another piece of the practice that I didn't get to. And so, I mean, going home that night, I didn't expect to win LVO. I mean, I won it. So I guess that sounds.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a really hard tournament to win. I thought it was going to be the hardest tournament to win, not just because there were more people, but because the format was going to allow a bunch of different kinds of lists. And some of the lists it was going to allow were going to be really challenging in their own right, even if they weren't going to be winners of the tournament, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Custodes is a great example of that. Custodes probably cannot win a tournament like LVO, but they can certainly beat almost anybody if their game goes right. I thought that Sheldon's Bloodletter list, which I had some heads up on, I thought that was going to be another such list. He ended up doing quite poorly. I don't really know what went wrong. But I thought that would be a list that'd be really hard to beat for my team. There were several such lists. I mean, I thought that Admech with Gottfried might be hard for me to beat. So just the odds that you're going to face something like that at some point, and then it just takes you out enough that you're not, going to make it to the top 8, I thought were high. And I figured, you can only, not that I think I've been lucky, because if I honestly look at the games and stuff, I don't have a lot of wins that are because of luck, but still, you just figure, eventually you're not going to win, right? Even if you prepared and everything else. Like, I definitely had holes in my preparation. I just thought, there's too much out there. So that was kind of my mentality. But there you go.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned it briefly. What do you think went wrong with the Militarum presence? Because I think a lot of people expected them to be one of the dominant groups. Do you think that there's a difference in the way that they play compared to Admech and Asuryani, like the other T3 shooty armies? Or what do you think happened?
Well, I don't... Boy. Yeah, I'm a little hard-pressed to say. Unfortunately, I didn't see those games enough. I would imagine that probably just the players are not... are just not top tier players, and no offense to them, but that would be my best guess just off the bat. I've said this and I'll say it again. Most games are decided in what I would call sort of the strategic phase, which is everything up to and including deployment, right?
Mustering.
Mustering, picking your secondaries, devising a strategy, guessing what your opponent's secondaries are. Some people don't even do those last two things, right? They have to pick secondaries, so they do it. They have to muster, so they do it. Mm-hmm. And then they just kind of go in and they do the same thing they always do, right? And but other people, I think, do all those things. I certainly try to do all those things. And I think a lot of times the game is won when I've picked the right strategy and then I go and execute it. And, sometimes my opponent hasn't done the same, right? And occasionally, you do get a game where maybe both people pick a really great strategy. But if I look at the games I've lost this year, certainly 2 of them I lost by the time deployment was over. And that would be against Shane Watts at BAO and against Emmanuel at SoCal. It's not to say there was not something that could have happened later in the game that would have changed that, but they didn't do anything stupid, and the dice weren't like insanely in my favor, and therefore it was on the rails, and it kind of just stayed there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fair enough to say they didn't do anything stupid, right? They played well, right? They did everything they were supposed to do to keep their strategy on point. And it's amazing how many stupid mistakes we all make, even at a high level. And I just read an article about that the other day by a guy who was talking about Overwatch, really. But I guess in Overwatch you can everybody's kind of rated by their percentile. You're a 95th percentile player, you're 99th, and they've got the stats, that's harder for us to accrue. Stats and the numbers, number of players. And this guy was just writing about how you can watch people in the 95th percentile play, and you can just observe just ridiculously basic errors done repeatedly. His conclusion was it's a lack of coaching, right? People aren't realizing the errors they're making. Because they can't watch, they can, with Overwatch you can, but they're not watching film of their game, and they're not really doing a critical analysis of that. And that might be true in Kill Team too. I do love that so many of my games this year have been recorded, and it's allowed me to go back and watch them and then say, like, here's what happened. But I've got some really cool games that weren't recorded, and that's how it is. I should be like George. I should be recording my own stuff whenever I go. That would be powerful.
Yeah. It's great, actually. I think that we're taking steps towards getting more streaming at big tournaments, kind of like we had at LVO, and I think we're going to have it at BAO too, where we'll just have all these VODs and like these high level games that we can kind of go back to and analyze and
right. Well, they did do it BAO last year, and they did it at SoCal last year.
Yeah. It's just,
basically everything Sheldon's been in on.
Yeah. Okay, so. I guess going into the tournament itself, I wanted to talk about secondaries a little bit.
Yeah.
And so how did you feel, first of all, about open secondaries as opposed to the limited choices?
Well, I think in the abstract, ultimately I practiced for this packet and I had fun with it. And this was my favorite packet of any that I've played so far. So the open secondaries were a part of it, and I didn't think it was really a detriment in any way. Traditionally, I feel like open secondaries do kind of make it a little too easy to complete secondaries in some circumstances. But I think maybe that the hold one, kill one changed the game sufficiently that wasn't so much the case. Maybe. That being said, I did have a bunch of games where I was near max points, so obviously that indicates easy completion of secondaries. But I think that, as Alex said, I think he said it on your show, that is the thing that's going to allow most people to bring the most teams. And that was a great goal. And I loved that. I loved that about the hold one, kill one. And the more I got into it, the more I saw the possibilities for new things that we haven't done before, things that people have said are bad that I think can be made good. And I think that's great. I think it's just a better way to play, I would say. And I think the open secondaries didn't detract from that, so I'm probably fine with them. Previously I'd been a fan of kind of Sheldon's, books of secondaries, if you will. Although my very favorite, I like the, mission with secondaries attached to it. I thought that was kind of cool, to give that extra flavor to the missions. But yeah, at this point I'll say, whatever. They're all fine. I think all 3 of those are good, and that the way that Nova did it is bad. I'll say that much.
Wow, hot take. Hot take. I kind of agree with you there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I think all 3 of the ways that we just talked about, where they're built into the mission, and where they're, because you can prep for the mission. If you bring a team that's not good at one of those, you kind of know that going in. Right?
Yeah.
Because you know what the 6 missions are. And the open secondaries, I think, helps everybody. And Sheldon's is designed to do the same in a more limited fashion. But the Nova, you definitely could go in there and suddenly you just get a secondary draw that you're like, wow, this is just the worst thing in the world for the particular matchup I've got. And that's not fun for anybody. So not that that happened a lot necessarily, but it might have. And it probably happened on a few tables because a lot of games got played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just like kind of another element of randomness in a game that's already super random as it is.
Yeah, we don't need it.
Well, yeah, I said somewhere, it's like when you roll when you do a matchup, it's like you're rolling a d6. And if it's a 1, it's really good for the left side. If it's a 6, it's really good for the right side. And when you do the Nova secondaries, it's like you're rolling 2 dice. And most of the time, you're going to get a number in the middle. But every now and then, you're going to get a 2 or a 12. And those games are going to be stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. Let's talk about your list.
The way I make a command roster, I think, is different than other people. And I see so many times people are like, "Oh, this is the standard Eldar list," I definitely don't have a standard Eldar list, and we'll talk about the lists I brought. I mean, there was only 2 repeats in 7 games, and the most common lists were not at all the standard Eldar list. But the other thing that they'll say is that there's probably like a core list, and then there's like little variations from it. And that's actually not how it goes at all either. What I start with is lists that are required to beat troublesome edge case teams, right? Yeah. And in this case, a starting point for that, since LVO last year, has always been Necrons. Necrons present just a very special challenge. They're not always a popular team. They're not always considered a high meta team. But the fact of the matter is, if I want to go and win a tournament, I need to be able to beat everybody I face. Yeah. And anybody can show up with a list of flayed ones, and if they practice really hard, they can beat some people, and that one of those people could be me. So I don't want that to happen. So you need the Necron list. Like, you need a list that specifically addresses that threat, right? And it requires leaving behind all kinds of things that people might think are standard, right? Like, you shouldn't bring a star cannon. You shouldn't bring the sort of 17-point Scorpion or Banshee that you typically might like, right? They all have multi-damage weapons. Multi-damage weapons are a big no-no, really, against Necron. Just statistic, and I don't know how much we'll talk about this, but I mean, I do a lot of stats when I prepare, right? I do a lot of stats when I play a game. I do a lot of stats when I'm thinking about moves I'm going to make, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to beat the Necrons by stacking flesh wounds, and that's going to give you a consistent victory. And if instead you look at, well, a 2-damage weapon, yeah, it's more likely to heal him, but it's also more likely to kill him. But it's inconsistent with everything else on your roster, because not everything you have is going to have 2-damage weapons, So Necrons just need a special list. So I made that list. It was a 9-man list. It was, what I played against Class Half Dead. So and it's got it's got, in this case, it had a Wraith Guard. That was kind of my innovation. For me, my innovation here, the Wraith Guard with the D side, I kind of thought of it at the last second. I initially thought maybe I'd bring a Wraith Guard with the swords, and that would be okay too. But then I started playing around with that D side, and it was just a game winner against the Flayed One list in particular. So hard to deal with. And then so that's 9 guys, and then I made a Custodes list. Now the Custodes are funny, because I'm not entirely sure that if I'd played them, I really would have tried to kill them or even engage and fight them. Yeah, right. But I wanted to have that ability on the list that I brought against them anyway, because just in case the game goes that way and I don't have a choice. So the Custodes list was eight guys. And between the Custodes list and the Necron list, there were only 2 guys in common. So that's 15 people on my roster right there. Yeah. So then I think about what else is troublesome. Now, traditionally, the last few tournaments, the first list I would have prepared against would have been Tau. Tau's, in the positional game, I think, been the most powerful. I don't think they are anymore, but they were, in the old positional game, the most powerful faction. And that the best players did not always bring them, but one time the best player did, and that was Nova, and he didn't even have a close game. The only close game he had was against his buddy that he practices against, right? Mm-hmm. Chuck. That was his only close game. Every other game was a blowout, which goes to show that he's a very good player, and they had the right faction. You know what I mean, doing the right thing. And then Nova had some extra rules to make it even worse. But that was the one time that are, yeah, I mean, again, I mean, I hate to, but I mean, you know, that was the best player who took Tao in the tournament, and it wasn't close, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was always worried that was going to happen in any tournament I went to. I had 5 Tao matches over the course of the year. I did win them all. And, you know, I mean, that is what it is. But generally speaking, the first list I would have countered in every previous tournament would have been Tao. But in this case, I didn't. I didn't think they were as good with hold one, killed one. I'd played a practice game against them. I found them much easier to deal with between the line of sight blocking, the different rules, and the hold one, kill one. They were just, it was like before, but much easier. And so I wasn't as worried about that. But still, that and kind of AdMech was the third list I made. And now, for the first time, I'm bringing in like my standard 17-point Howling Banshee with an Executioner, my standard 17-point Scorpion with a Biting Blade. And I think when I made those 3 lists, I was already at 21 people on the roster. So it was about making a cut, and now I got 20. And then what can I build out of this 20 that I haven't thought of yet that might be useful? But ultimately, I went there, you know, with, I guess you might say, you know, with 3 big lists in mind: Tau, if you will, Necrons, and then you know, kind of Grey Knight, Custodes. And then I devised 2 other lists that were fairly different than those, that I didn't necessarily have an idea of how to use, but I thought they were cool lists, and I thought they would have a potential. And then I made some small variations. And then, you know, of course, any of these lists, you can swap a fusion for a flamer, right? Or I guess a fusion probably for a Dire Avenger in many cases. And so there's micro movements like that. But ultimately, I went in there with sort of 5 lists that don't have more than like half in common with each other that I can construct out of 20. And then from there, you know, I'm mixing it up. So that's how the roster gets built. And I guess the real key is it's not like I have a list and then I swap it a little bit, because what I have are more like 3 lists and then and maybe 5. I have 5 lists that I can swap up, and I'm kind of trying to, like, that's why the roster is so much work to kind of get it to that spot. Now, that being said, I'm not sure if my 20-man roster, despite me thinking about it, is that different than the other Eldar. I mean, it's somewhat different, but I haven't looked at them enough to think about it. But I'm definitely using it I think in a pretty different way. Because it seems like a lot of those guys did, except for maybe Janice, I think a lot of those guys did bring kind of the same thing every time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Alex Narak brought the Wraith Guard and Wraithblade. I haven't looked at his list.
He did not. Yeah.
He did not, and I thought that might have played a little bit of a part in some of the matchups that he struggled with, because I know that he played Glass Half Dead, and he played those flayed ones, and he didn't have the Wraith Guard with the D-Scythe, which was in your matchup very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he also had he brought all the multi-damage weapons too. I think my take is that Alex had never played Necrons before.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask, was there anything that came up at the tournament that was really good that you weren't really expecting, that you didn't have as much prep for, that kind of took you off guard, I guess?
Yeah, yes. In the 3rd round, I played Gene Stealers by Marcus. I think Marcus Fields is what he put on his. But I think he has like a cooler name.
I think it was Marcus Macabre.
Yeah, Marcus. He calls himself Marcus Macabre or Macabre, right?
Oh, I was actually right about that.
Yeah. But I think that's like his screen name, right?
Okay, yeah, just like
him. Marcus
Sandwich.
Fields on his player name on my sheet. So I'm guessing Fields. Or maybe it's 2 names, but Macabre is like a cool last name. I think he just made it. I don't know. Now the thing about Marcus's list is it was really off meta for the tournament, because it was like 16 Gene Stealers, right? So a 16-man list. I know you guys said before you think hordes are still good, and I would say, well, you never know. They might be good at a given tournament, but they really shouldn't be. In my opinion, they shouldn't be. Like they should be handleable in hold one, kill one. And not to go too far afield, but the fundamental problem is that holding one is trivial for every army. Every army can hold one. And so if you're a horde, the only thing you're doing better is holding more. And that's only 4 points. And you're certainly making it much easier for your opponent to kill more. And you're probably making it trivial for them to kill one. which you may be able to do too, but you're not, and so you're just giving up more points than you're getting in that primary right there. And it's open secondaries, so everybody can score their secondaries. So, being a horde doesn't give you, or shouldn't give you, much of an advantage, especially there's plenty of killing secondaries, and anybody who's facing a horde is going to take killing secondaries, or should. And assuming they did that right, I mean, the horde's just got a 4-point problem baked in to their game. Because they're not going to stop their opponent from holding one, but their opponent might well stop them from killing one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the where I came from when I was talking about that, and I have shifted a little bit since this is now post LVO.
Sure.
And we talked a little bit with Will Blood about it, and the kind of the weird randomness that comes with taking models off the board and having to rely on that sort of 50-50 injury roll and trying to play to avoid that, I guess, or having to play to avoid relying on that so much as just
there's just a lot of die rolls that you need to succeed on in order to kill models in the game. Whereas you can just park a guy anywhere.
Yeah, I have shifted a bit though. I see now how some of these killing secondaries were kind of huge. I know you were really big on Fire and Fade, getting those bounty tokens with the kills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Well, and just, I mean, again, I think it's just, if I was playing a horde list, I'd go in there and say, I mean, what's my game plan to win? I'm hoping he just doesn't take my models off because he rolls terrible. I mean, in a given game, maybe one turn, you have a bad injury roll dice. But over the course of even a game of Kill Team, you know what I mean? Like the dice come and the dice go. So, it's frustrating sometimes that you don't get a kill you think you should have, but it's going to work out over the course of 4 rounds. Mm-hmm. That's my belief anyway.
Yeah, I've seen now that, I guess, especially with the top lists, Grey Knights and stuff, and seeing like some of these lists that just kill, and they're super efficient.
Yeah. Watch.
Right.
Anyway, we were on something. I
know. No, you were asking if I'd seen a list that was unusual and that prevented a threat I hadn't expected.
Cult.
Yeah. So the problem with Marcus's list was that it had 16 models, and so it had sort of some challenges. But it's a really good shooting list, and I didn't really know that about Gene Stealers. And the other thing I didn't know until I played Marcus was that if you put some models into the Orc Tower, they can see the whole damn board. Like, just because of the sort of star pattern that the board forms, and you're kind of near the middle. So you put 2 guys at the front edge of that tower, and there's very, very little that can hide from them. And that's what Marcus did. He went up, he took that tower, and I was like, holy crap. Now, not that they're not outstanding shooters, and they might well miss, but like he's got 2 guns that can kill most of my guys pretty well, and they've got complete control of the field. And then he's got these 4 dudes with these satchel charges or whatever, which I hadn't played against before, right? And he's like, well, you can only use it once. So I'm like, I mean, how much do you want? A 12-point model? I mean, how much great shooting does any model get in a given game, right? I mean, most guys get like 1 clear line of shot, right? There's not a whole lot of guys who just sit back and kill every turn. So it's really not that bad to only be able to do it once. So he's got 4 dudes with these just like grenades that'll kill anything. He's got these guys sitting on the tower, and then he's got a couple flamers too, which are not trivial for my army.
No.
And it was just a lot of firepower, a lot of killing power all over the place that I kind of couldn't hide from. And I mean, ultimately I was able to deal with it because, I was actually able to hide from him, right? I mean, I put a lot of things in reserve, and I did just literally hide the first round, much as I did in the very final game. And even from that position, I was still able to pick off a couple of his models because he had so many, and he couldn't hide. They were everywhere. And so by the time we get to the 3rd round, I mean, he just was in a tough spot, and he was already having leadership problems and stuff like that. But it definitely got me thinking, man, there's got to be some cool stuff you can do with Gene Stealer Colts, because they have some more elite models too. And I haven't looked into them terribly, but they got aberrants and stuff. And I just think I bet you could make some cool lists happen with Gene Stealer Colts that were smaller.
Yeah. I've noticed that since Hold More, Kill More has become a thing, we've actually been seeing like a decent win rate all of a sudden from Gene Call. They haven't been taking anything, like taking events,
Right.
but they've been doing better. I don't know if that's coincidence or what. I haven't really cracked that yet, but
Yeah. Well, I think they're good. They're good at killing. And Marcus, he was a solid player. I mean, I think he was
Yeah.
kind of determined to bring his list that he was used to, and if he'd had like somebody sit down with him, prep, hold one, kill one, and like come up with like a different list, I mean, I think he might have been a contender. So anyway, I mean, I won that game, but it surprised me what I saw there, and it was something I hadn't faced before.
yeah. How about Drakari? I wanted to ask you about that. That was one that, I mean, there's the one Drakari player, Alec,
Yeah,
but he went 4-0 day 2.
sure. Well, I played Alec at SoCal, right, in the
Wow.
semifinals, and then I played another Drukari player in the finals at SoCal with my Azoyani. So that guy's name is Steve, I think. So I was familiar with Alec's list, and with Steve had a slight variation on it, but they both were kind of doing that same thing. And yeah, I mean it's a formidable list, and obviously Alec had played it well. I mean, I won the tournament. He had to play me the third round, or whatever, the fourth round, right? So if he hadn't had to play me the fourth round, he'd played some other guy. Then he would have been the one in the finals, perhaps, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
so I think, as it turns out, Alec maybe took 8th place at SoCal, and Steve took 2nd. But just probably just about who you play went, right? I mean, it's best if you're going to lose one game. You want it to be, well, apparently you want it to be the very first game of the tournament. I didn't know that before, but that's apparently the way.
Yeah, apparently. New strategy, yeah.
But if not that, you want it to be the very last game of the tournament, right?
Yeah. And actually, on your point, it's kind of funny because if I'm not mistaken, Alec didn't have a ton of experience in the Thousand Sons matchup, and placing first was the reason he had to play James Skinner, who was Thousand Sons, on Sunday, and it kind of bit him in the butt.
Right.
He should have tanked a game.
Yeah, maybe he should have lost one.
It's so bad to say.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to tank a game on purpose. I mean, you just, first off, you know what's else going to happen. You don't know what's suddenly going to twist it, and then it just. Yeah. I think it would. Most people. I mean, they want to play Kill Team to win, and it would be really hard to not do that. But I think of Dakota. I think he only lost. Like, he was dominating the first day, and then he lost his 4th game, but he lost it bad, and suddenly not even the top 8, right? And it kind of just took him right out of the.
He fell right to 9th, I think, right outside.
Yeah, well, and they did that on the strength of schedule, and I think the problem is that he played Sheldon. And the problem is that he destroyed everybody. He played so hard that it just took their will to win right out of them, and they all ended up with low records.
Yeah, we almost had half of the top 8 as Austriani.
I know, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure people will go nuts about that, and that's, I mean, that's fine. But there you go, and they were good players.
Yeah, that was a question I had. What do you think about that balance? Do you think that it had more to do with the pilots? How good is Austriani? Are they that good, or just we seeing incredible players taking them?
Well, I mean, if I really had the unlimited time to prepare, I think that I would have brought Adeptus Astartes. I think that there's a list in there that would have been the strongest thing at this tournament. And I was thinking about Death Watch 2. So that being the case, I mean, and I obviously the first thing I do is I play those against my Azoyani. I think those can beat Azoyani. So, I mean, Azoyani's obviously good. You can't have all these players there. But that being said, when I look at myself and I play against myself, I mean, I beat Azoyani sometimes. I think there's a stronger team out there. And I probably, I'm not as good at playing every other team, right? I put a lot of work into Astartes. So maybe I'm pretty good with them, but I bet when I play AdMech against myself, I'm not as good as Alex Squires, right? To say nothing of whatever the person who would have beat me, or whatever it would be, right? That other player who's even better with AdMech, who we haven't met yet, right? So I think that I don't see a problem balance-wise with them, but I think that. I mean, I'm surprised with the success I had over the course of the year that we did not see more Azoyani players sooner. quite frankly.
I
right?
agree. It took a
Because,
while.
yeah, it took a while. And I mean, we saw people jumping on the Tyranid horde like quick. And I think the reason is that Tyranid horde is not easy to play. Okay, it's really not. And I mean, me and Miguel played a lot of practice games against it, and I learned a lot about melee combat playing with him. But it looks like it's easy. It looks like it's a one-stop solution, right? Whereas I think if you took my list, especially my list from before elites, right, and you plug it in and you play some game, like you're going to lose those games, and you're going to be like, well, I don't know what the hell he's doing, but I'm not going to waste any more time with this, right? Asuryani after elites is probably a little bit more user friendly, but still, we run some pretty fragile units. You know what I mean? And yes, that Howling Banshee just looks unstoppable when you use it right. But when you use it wrong, I mean, it's just a T3 model that can't get where it needs to be, or sitting in the corner doing you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, we played a game recently where I was testing out Asuryani for like one of my first times playing him, and I had the Banshees against something you ran.
Yeah, you had 3 Banshees against my Tau, and the first 3 models on your kill team to die were those Banshees.
Yeah, I'm like, they're flying off the board. I'm like, man, what's going on? I don't.
No, it's not. It's not a. And that's not to say that the potential's not there and everything, but I mean, it really, there's a learning curve on Asuryani. And I've heard, people have talked about this in big 40K too. And I think it's an inherent thing in the Asuryani. It always has been in the Eldar, that there's supposed to be a team that's a little bit harder to play. And and that's, and then you kind of have to like coordinate these different pieces to make it work. And it's inevitable that if you do that right, you're going to be a little bit ahead of somebody whose team just kind of goes forward, right?
Yeah.
Like it has to be that way, because otherwise it wouldn't be balanced over the long term. And so I think that's the reason that in the tournament scene, Eldar always or often look. I mean, I guess right now in 40K they don't look strong, but traditionally Eldar usually look pretty strong in big 40K and here. And I just think it's because of that feature of them. But yeah, that being said, I mean, I'm looking at a lot of other lists that I think would be cool to play. I mean, I don't have all these models, and I don't have time to make them all. But like, I've got an Astra Militarum list I want to make. I mean, I think Ryan and Rouse is something that nobody's doing that I think has got some potential.
Completely
I
agree.
don't want to talk about Ryan and Rouse.
What's that?
I don't want to talk about them.
They're great. They're very good.
They're very good. That's all I'm gonna say.
Fair enough. So yeah, so we don't want to ruin that, right?
Let's leave it. Yeah, we'll let you surprise us all with it in 3 months.
In there too. Make me sick.
Right. No, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, that the list does have Gottfried as well as Ryan and Rouse, but I think Ryan and Rouse is kind of the thing that makes it cool that other people aren't doing. And I mean, I think Sisters is a neat thing. I mean, they can bring a heavy flamer more affordably by an order of magnitude than anybody else, and that's a neat list. Yeah. And they have really good melee options both for Horde and for strong things that they can swap in and out. So, and they can bring Gottfried, by the way.
They
right?
can.
Yep,
Yes,
they can bring Gottfried. The most undercosted model in this game.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Sisters is something, and like I said already, the Astartes, I definitely want to play with that. I think that the thing Astartes is so hard to list build for, but again,
oh my god, I was just talking about this on the last episode. Yeah,
right. But in terms of an army where you can really bring, like, here are 5 lists that somebody looking at your roster who hasn't seen you play before, they won't even conceive of the 5 lists you're going to bring, and that's itself an advantage, right? And so, yeah, those are all, I think those things are out there. So I don't think by any means like Asuryani is broken and is going to run away with it. But at the moment, we have got some skilled players who've come around to it. I mean, I think many of these guys, that was their team, and whatever, they practiced with it and they've gotten to that point. And so you're going to expect to see them. So you certainly better have an answer for them. But those answers do exist.
Yeah, they're a high skill ceiling, and I think that those kinds of groups are going to rise to the top of competitive scenes.
So I guess like before we go into like the actual tournament like recap, I guess, itself. I don't know when to talk about this, so I'm just gonna ask it now. Can we talk a little bit about the Wraith Guard and just how you used him, basically? I don't know.
The Wraith Guard with the D scythe.
Yes,
that one.
specifically
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I don't know if you guys. There was a pretty good episode on Glass Half Dead with a guy from the Discord, You Tie My Shoes, and they were like, what are the top 3 or top 4 models for LVO? And they kind of went back and forth on their picks. And then at some point, I think Biranid chimed in on their chat and was like, Wraith Guard with D-Scythe. And I think Biranid was being serious. But they thought he was joking or something, and they just totally mocked it. And I was sitting there with my D-Scythe, like list, and I'm like, you wait.
Yeah. I mean, it was huge. It seemed like the MVP.
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted to highlight it here. Just so like so from what we saw, you like pretty much always had it in reserve, and then you would bring it onto the field, and it would just like tear it up.
Right. Well, I didn't bring it in reserve. So I you might not know, but I played it against the Grey Knights player the second day.
Mm-hmm.
I used it twice against Glass Half Dead. I used it against an Astartes player, but that wasn't really a super competitive match. And then I used it against the Grey Knights, and I mean that was a super competitive match. And he was good in all those places. But yeah, I mean against Glass Half Dead, I mean he's got these guys who they're not veteran specs. They're not going to reach me the first turn. Just no way they're going to reach me the first turn. But they're going to try, because what else can they do? So they're going to run from their current position forward. And that's not the only thing that Glass could have done, but that's what he was doing, right? And he was doing it at the edges. And so with that being the case, it's a very easy choice for me to reserve it, because one side or the other, which, I have to pick before he. No, I don't have to pick before he does that. So I'm going to see how fast he moves, and the one that gets a little further, I can just measure out. Oh yeah, 8 inches away. There we go. I'll go right there. And of course, if I had to spend a point to do it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. If neither of them made a good advance, that's what you'd do. You'd spend the 1 point, right? You can come in on any edge. But as it turns out, I got to do it for free, so that was an easy decision. And then, think of it against the particular Wraith or whatever, the Lich he's bringing. I mean, its odds of putting a flesh wound on him are incredibly high. So as long as I'm reserving a command point, he's going to have a flesh wound on him, probably after I shoot at him. And then the next turn, what's he going to do? I mean, he can charge me. That's a terrible idea. But what else can he? He's got a flesh wound on him. So he charges me. It's not like it's an auto kill, right? Because the numbers are still. But if you really have to reserve these rerolls with the Necrons. So if I've reserved a reroll, then I've got about maybe a 40% chance he's going to have 2 flesh wounds, and maybe a 60% chance he's going to be taken out of action. If he gets to me with 2 flesh wounds, he's probably not going to hurt me, and then he might, but he's probably not going to kill me, and then I'm going to walk away and do it again the next turn. So it's just like. You're gonna win. Something I'd seen, and actually, believe it or not, this is bad on me. I didn't discover this until I played against Jacob with the Grey Knights. I didn't realize they could retreat as well as fall back and still shoot. But I did learn that in the course of that game, and What's that?
Oh, they can do that? How is that?
Was this like? Did they get like a new tactic in Annual or something?
No. It's on their data sheet.
Oh, it's specifically a Wraith Guard thing.
Yeah, it's a Wraith Guard thing. Wraith Guard can retreat or fall back and still shoot. And fall back, I knew, and I was like, okay, that's not. I got the tactic anyway. But retreat, that's like, the answer usually to something like a Wraith Guard is you charge it from outside of 8 inches, right? Yeah. You can't do that. I'll retreat. You declare the charge, I retreat. Maybe you make a 12-inch charge, but probably you don't. And now you're standing in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to shoot you, or you stay back where you started. And either way, I get to pick where I retreat, so I might still have useful things to do, right? But that's all the difference in the world.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So now, obviously, the thing about the Wraith Guard, you can't bring it against somebody like the AdMech list, so somebody that's got a gun that can shoot it and kill it, right? I mean, there's some
Yeah.
people have that and some people don't. But the Grey Knights didn't really have a gun like that. Obviously, they have melee guys like that. But the melee you're not as worried about because, if somebody's got a really, really souped up melee unit, it's going to kill a lot of stuff, and that's fine. But the Wraithguard has still got the potential to do useful things before that happens. Are there other lists I could have used it on? I mean, I think so. I think I could have used it against the Tyranid big bugs that I faced. Probably should have. I could not. The one you can't bring it against those Gene Stealers because one of the guys with a grenade is going to get in or whatever, and and they don't care if they lose a little guy to them. But I brought it again. I mean, it was an odd Astartes list. I actually, to be honest, I first came up with the idea of the Wraithguard because I was talking with a guy named Zero Stride on the Discord, and he really likes Eliminators. Yeah, Pat, right.
Yeah,
who was I think the top performing Astartes player at the time.
Yeah, that's right. It was like
eliminators, lots of eliminators.
Yeah, it was like 60 to 75% of his roster was eliminators. Yeah.
And we've been talking back and forth, since several tournaments back about Astartes and stuff, and he always has sort of had an interest in eliminators that's greater than my own. But I thought, I bet other people are thinking like him too. And if I ended up facing, what's good against an eliminator? And I thought, well, an eliminator really can't kill a Wraithguard very well. I mean, it could if it had a las fusel, but the thing about just a single las fusel is you might be able to hide from it or something.
Right.
And so I'm like, the problem with an eliminator is it's pretty durable and it's hard to hit. But the Wraithguard can fix that, right? He can advance up and then shoot. He's got 17-inch range or something by the time those two things get put in, and he's just gonna, he's gonna flesh wound him for sure. Right now, of course, he's not reliable for the kill, but he's whatever. You do your damage where you can, and if it's something they can't take out, I mean, he's gonna get the kills over time. And eliminators are pretty expensive models in their own right. So I kind of had that idea for him, but then it was when I was playing against the flayed ones that I was like, oh my God, I could use it here too. And then I'm like, well, that's maybe two things it can do. And then, I sort of let my imagination go after that. But yeah, no, it turns out to be as long as you avoid its one weakness, which is that it can be shot by some kinds of weapons and taken out, and it's expensive, of course, then it's pretty good. And the thing about hold one, kill one is you really don't have to be scared of expensive models like you used to be, because you spend all this effort to kill it, right? I mean, even with plasma, you're going to have to shoot it a few times probably, just because it's, if you fire 3 plasma shots, one of them's likely to have not just done its job, and then you need the other 2 to get it out of action. So if you put it in a spot where all 3 plasma could shoot it, and then they all shoot it the first turn, okay, yeah, it might go out right there, but it's still probably allowed a lot of other things to move. And it's only 1 kill, and maybe you allowed yourself to get 2 kills in that time frame. You know what I mean? It's it's sort of there's sort of an inherent advantage there, even in the worst case scenario. So, Anyway, I was very happy with that Wraithguard. Really glad I made that addition to the list, and he did a lot for me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
we were excited to see the Wraithguard. I know that Janice was taking it even before it was kill hold.
Right,
right. And then this tournament came around and we saw you taking it, Janice. I don't know if anybody else took it outside of you two, but it did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's for sure a thing. And I mean, I think with hold kill, we should see more Wraiths for sure. It's a nice addition.
Do you think that applies to kind of all those big models too? One thing we didn't really see, at least on stream, was Terminators, and we were talking a little bit about Adeptus Astartes. Where do you? Because I have my own thoughts about it, but where do you think the Terminators fall in this?
Yeah, no, I think they're good. I mean, I think that I would, if my Astartes list would have had a Terminator on it. Probably a few.
Okay.
A few different builds. I mean, I might not have brought more than one in a given list. I don't know, but no, I think the Terminator's got a place. I mean, he's got a nice deep strike talent, right, that goes with him too, or his whatever stratagem. And not to Well, I don't think this is a secret because Elliot had this list out there, but I mean, Elliot was toying with the start days list too. And I think his had 2 Terminators in it. And he had some really nice painted models that he sort of had just hanging out on a table by itself at LVO for anyone who was curious to take a peek at. So he's thinking that way too.
Very cool. Yeah. It's been a while since I've played Astartes just because I mean, I've just kind of gotten away from them because Death Watch are just efficient at killing everything.
Yeah, we were pretty high on Death Watch actually before this, and there just wasn't a ton of pilots, and it didn't happen. But
Death Watch probably is another. I mean, I was playing around with the Death Watch list before Elites came out, and then when Elites came out, I liked the Astartes better. But yeah, I'd be curious to go back to them again and see.
Yeah, I know Biranid was planning on taking them up until like right before the tournament. He just wasn't able to get them ready in time.
Right.
So he went with the big bugs.